5 brings us into multiplication. We'll do multiplication and division. Now actually multiplication and division are a little bit easier with rules. The problem comes in with when you try to apply those rules back to addition and subtraction. So be very careful that you don't get them all mixed up. Remember, you can use your concept notes when you're taking a test, so it's going to be very important to have those filled out. So we're going to multiply some real numbers, and it can be, remember that multiplication is a fancy way of saying a repeated addition. So we're going to be applying those rules. Now when we're multiplying, we're going to follow the same little technique I did before. I'm going to look at like terms, and this time my rules are going to apply that a -3 times a -2, but this time same signs make positives, no matter whether they're both positive to begin with or they're both negative. Same signs make positives. So a -3 times a -2 is going to give me a +6. And then I'm left with my 4. So my answer for letter A is 24. Now our next one, we have 3 and they're all negative. A negative, let's do the easier one first, sorry. A negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. So I have a +6 there. Pretty ugly +6. +6. But I still have my -1/2. Now, negative times a positive is going to be a negative. Different signs make it be a negative. And half of 6, that's going to be a -3. Now, the next rule we're going to look at is exponents. If the exponent is an even number, that will make it be that it's going to be a positive. If it's an odd number, that will make it that it's going to be a negative, because you're repeating a negative pattern. So -1 to the 4th power would be -1 times -1. Negative times a negative would give me a positive. Times -1 times -1. There's again a positive. And 1 times 1 is 1. So following those rules, we're going to use it with some factors here. A negative times a negative gives me a positive. 2 times x gives me 2x. Positive times 3 negatives. So negative times negative n would give me n squared. Okay, and then a negative would give me negative n cubed. Okay, and I have a 3, so 3 times negative n cubed would give me a negative 3n cubed. Again, we could do it this way. Positive and a negative gives me a negative. A negative and a negative gives me a positive. A positive and a negative gives me a negative. So we ended up with negative 3n cubed. This one, be careful. Do your exponents before you do your multiplication. Negative a squared, that'd be an even number, so that would be an a squared. And then I have that times a -1. Now I have a negative and a positive, so that's going to give me a negative a squared. And then the last one, another be careful, we have the negative sign outside of the parentheses. So first we just do the exponent applies to directly to the left of it. So y to the 4th, but we want y to the 4th to be the opposite. So it's negative y to the 4th. Again, you can pause and you can look over the properties that you've learned. Commutative is always the order, and associative, and if you were in my room in 6th grade, you remember we would write commutative with a very ugly O, and we would write associative with a very ugly C to remember the parentheses for grouping with associative and order with O. So, evaluating a variable expression, and we have a when here, so we're going to be doing the evaluate when means substitution. So we have -4 times negative 1, and then we're going to substitute in a negative 5. Now we have a negative times a negative, so we could have a positive 4, and then we have, we have a negative 5. So we're going to have negative, that would be the same as saying a negative 1 times negative 5, or that's a positive 5. Okay, if you look, we have 4 negatives giving us a positive 20. All right, let's see if I can do a better job writing this one. Negative 9.7, it's going to be times a negative 5, just substituting in for an x this time. And then that's going to be times a negative 2. A negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. Negative 9.7. I could also do it this way. Let's do it this way. It's going to be easier. Negative 5 times negative 2 is going to give me a positive 10. Negative times a negative. That gives me, I'm left with my negative 9.7. That gives us mental math. We can just move this over. We'd have a negative 97. All right. Now we're going to use it in real life. So we have some flying squirrels. That's real life for you. See those all the time. A flying squirrel descends from a tree with a velocity of negative 6 feet per second. Find the vertical displacement in 3.5 seconds. So the displacement we're going to use, we have to find it, so we're going to give it a variable. Let's give it d since we're talking about displacement. We know that that is going to be equal to the velocity, which we were told was negative 6, and then the time it took, which was 3.5. Just plugging it into the formula that they gave us there. So the distance, the vertical displacement is going to be negative 21. Positive times a negative. And so we're going to get negative. And negative 6 times 3.5. We get negative 21. So what that's telling us, again, if you remember, it traveled a vertical displacement of a negative 21 feet, or you could say that the negative 21 feet means it went downwards 21 feet. All right, moving along here. Again, we have an application of products of negatives, and example 5 in your book, page 95, will tell you how to do the keystrokes on your calculator.